So Peter Mandelson just appeared to be someone who would come in, he would bring pizzazz. I went to, actually, one of the first long weekends of receptions, a.k.a. parties, which it frequently held, and particularly at this time in I think it's late April, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner weekend. And there he was, really holding court. People were impressed by, frankly, by the fact that he could do, evening after evening, hosting, glad-handing, disappearing into corners, talking to the right people. Of course, you're going to hear different things from different quarters about was he liked, was he not. But he was seen, I think, as broadly being successful at that. And that's why it was just such a crashing moment when it started really to leak out more and more that the relationships with Epstein had been much more intimate than he had suggested, and the financial dependency and other things, the things that he seemed to be asking favours for. I don't think he had gone into that detail at all in this.
I mean, is it one of the risks of appointing a politician as opposed to a well-practiced, long-serving diplomat into that position, given also, of course, that the politician in this case was pretty high risk?
Yeah, I mean, they would be the two risk factors that you put your finger on there. I suppose the opposing case that was made in Downing Street, Keir Starmer, still in some ways a rookie prime minister in dealing with foreign affairs, and the Trump administration not easy to deal with. Whether one agrees or not, I think he felt that having someone who understood Labour, who understood his number 10, who had been a serving politician, but who, if you like, was fairly sort of flexible in his ideology. I don't think you looked at Peter Mandelson and thought, oh, well, he's a little lefty, that a lot of his friends were on the right, he was able to do that. That was a new kind of appointment for a new kind of era. Now, as it happens, I think the fact that then the vetting was clearly was done in haste. I mean, I'm told by people close to Peter Mandelson, who, of course, will want to defend himself in these pictures, and you can see on his face that it is this absolutely devastating moment for someone, over 70 years old, who's seen himself as being at the top of British politics and the British progressive establishment to be going through this. So he will be saying, well, yeah, I answered the questions that you put to me. I'm told that at one point some of these vetting conversations were moved through very, very fast because it was the Prime Minister's will to get him into that post. Now, clearly there are big questions to answer there. Peter Mandelson, as we're now seeing, he will be going through questioning and whether we do get to a point of charge for any offence. But either way, there are massive questions for the vetting process of someone. Given exactly what you said, he'd come from a non-traditional background to an ambassador's post.
Yeah, lots of questions about the vetting process. Other questions too, because we have to emphasise he's been arrested, not charged, innocent until proved guilty, and he has always denied wrongdoing. But just going to the heart of the allegations, the misconduct in public office, appears to relate to the time in 2008 when Peter Mandelson was right at the heart of Gordon Brown's Downing Street operation.
Yes, and it's really to do with that, and to do with the fact that when he was in government, he was a business secretary, so he's in cabinet, he had access to all of the discussions and some documentation about what was happening in the aftermath of the major global financial crisis. The allegation, and that is supported to an extent by some things, but of course when you look in the Epstein files, you're seeing a particular context of people who thought they were privately communicating. Did he at that point pass information that in some way could be seen as being damaging to the UK's interests for it to be shared, or was he just being gossipy and a bit irresponsible, which is bad, but is obviously not, doesn't across the bar. And I think one thing that we're learning, if you look also, not to compare these two things directly, Mark, but one thing we will learn in the next weeks and months as we go through this is it's easy to say, gosh, that person did something, they should never have done it. Whether that clears any sort of bar to be potentially an offence, and what isn't in scope there will, I think, be a big talking point for all of us as we go through this.
Yes, and as Sam Coates was saying, I mean, for Keir Starmer and so many Labour MPs, these images, whether he's guilty, not guilty, these images are just
it's a
the
miasma,
wrong time
you know,
for Keir
it's
Starmer, isn't it? It's
exactly. I mean, if you're seeing, I spent last week at a broad Munich security conference. We saw Keir Starmer, putting on a really good front after a terrible week that he'd had when he really narrowly kept his own job. But then turning up at Munich, putting the UK on the stage in security and defence, genuinely an important thing at a time of high risk. Only then, to find the next images, the next things that I'm constantly and others being phoned up and asked about across Europe and beyond is first Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and now Peter Mandelson. I wouldn't say the UK is massively on the front foot in terms of its international marketing campaign at this moment.
No, although the UK is on the front foot when it comes to at least arresting these. I mean, it was a point made last week to me on the Thursday when Amy Wallace, who's the biographer for Virginia Giuffre, made the point that actually the police activity that is taking place by and large in the UK, not in the United States, which was a point well made.
It's a point well made after the Epstein files opened everything up, but it was, one could say that there was a lack of curiosity about certain aspects of life. And I don't use the establishment usually in a sort of word, to sort of throw rotten tomatoes at it. Journalists, I think, close to politics can also be seen to be kind of part of that world in some way. But yes, I think it did. But there is a sort of asymmetric effect on the UK, isn't there? Because we have a Peter Mandelson, we have a major royal involved relative to the size of the country and relative to process. You're right, we do seem to be cracking on with it, but in the short term it is, I think, not the image that Keir Starmer would be wanting to see. And remember, we have a by-election coming on Thursday. Again, would you be having this going on if you could design the leaflets? Probably not.
No, but it's a point you made a little earlier, which is interesting, that this is a man, Peter Mandelson, who likes to be in control, and now he most certainly isn't in control as the police begin these interviews.
Well, indeed. I mean, I was actually that part of Wiltshire, very close to, to one of his properties, were also, I think, being searched. You're reporting now is being searched. I think that's a matter of, that is part of the process when this kind of arrest on this kind of suspicion takes place. And, he will certainly be able to have his defence and be able to make that. But what you're seeing is there, rows and rows of paparazzi in these country lanes in Wiltshire. As it happened, he was in London and we saw the pictures of him getting into the car there in London as he was arrested. But I think what you're seeing is a perception, that this is this sort of sickly cycle in which people who 1 minute are part of the glitz and gloss, the front foot for Britain and the world, or then being accompanied into police cars looking miserable and traumatised. I mean, I think this does have an impact. It does have an impact on politics. And as the story is really only beginning in both cases of what finally comes out of it, and also what the lessons will be. Right now, I think you make a good point to say...
Lessons we do seem to be getting on. Lessons for who?
Well, lessons in one case for the royal family, and lessons for politics, for the Cabinet Office, for the Labour Party, for politics, lessons for pretty much everyone involved. And there will be more than enough blame to go around. Can we get through it having some sort of improvement to our processes rather than a lot of blame shifting and saying it wasn't me, Gov?
Anne, thank you very much.